This episode of the podcast is brought to you by New Bloom Labs.
New Bloom Labs has expanded their standard potency panel that now reports 16 different cannabinoids. The new additions include CBD, VA, and both isomers of delta-10 THC. These now come standard on every potency analysis that New Bloom Labs reports. With locations in Tennessee and Texas and more to come soon, New Bloom Labs provides precise, accurate analysis and the best turnaround time in the industry. I'm talking 1 business day turnaround on most test results. New Bloom Labs understands the cannabis industry, plain and simple, and what's important to growers, processors, and manufacturers. Give them a call today at 844-TEST-CBD or visit their website at newbloomlabs.com. Superior science, rapid results, New Bloom Labs.
This episode of the podcast is brought to you by EndoCanna Health.
EndoDNA is a simple DNA test that maps your entire endocannabinoid system to help you better understand what cannabinoids and terpene profiles best suit your genetic makeup. EndoDNA is essentially a blueprint or roadmap to your best cannabis experience that is tailored to your unique needs and body chemistry. Imagine being armed with personal information when visiting a dispensary or retail CBD shop. You'll have the power and capability to purchase products that best align to your genotype. So if you're interested in understanding your own genetics and taking action by regulating your endocannabinoid system through optimal cannabis and CBD experiences, go to their website at endodna.com/products and use the promo code CONNECT15 for a 20% discount. Again, that's endodna.com/products and the promo code is CONNECT15 for a 20% discount. The future of precision cannabinoid therapeutics is here with EndoDNA. Hello, my fellow people of the plant. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Cannabinoid Connect podcast, your favorite podcast that includes industry-facing conversations with the industry's leading experts that aim to educate and inform the public regarding the plant's endless benefits. My guest today is Kaelan Castetter. He's the CEO at Empire Standard and the Vice Chair of the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association. What's up, Kaelan? Thanks for coming on today.
Hey, man, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely. Before we started recording, we were talking about New York, upstate New York specifically, which is where you're based in Binghamton. Is that right?
Yep, Binghamton. Yep, home to we call it Public Ivy. So the best public school in New York State, Binghamton University.
Love it. Yes, very familiar with Binghamton. Yes, and I've been to the city like many others, right? Haven't made it upstate New York, but I'm interested because New York's been hitting the headlines recently, specifically in the cannabis industry, with of course Governor Cuomo's proposed bill to go adult use with the state.
Yep.
And so let's just kind of talk there. I mean, I'm first interested about the hemp market in New York. Obviously, after the 2018 Farm Bill passed. So tell us a little bit about the hemp market. And what you're hearing on the adult use side and kind of how that will be how hemp will be impacted by that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, I mean, New York, we were really, pretty close after the 2014 Farm Bill. We had a pilot program set up, right? It was very limited in scope, maybe had, I think it was like 10 growers and processors, mostly linked to research universities. And then in 2017, they really opened it up. More broadly so to the industry and to, commercialized, and that was actually when I got in the industry. We were the first licensed processor. We were making hemp infused wine, the only hemp infused wine in the country at the time.
Wow.
So from the beginning, it was a very close knit community, and then the 2018 Farm Bill really opened things up across the country, right? And you saw a lot of investment. A lot of maybe, in hindsight, ill-advised, large scale growing operations pop up. And, I think New York experienced what the rest of the country experienced, was a little bit of a boom bust cycle, right, on hemp. And there was a lot of acreage planted on the 2019 season. And then there wasn't much of a market for it. The processing infrastructure has come along. We have some, very sophisticated processors in the state, maybe a handful, maybe about 5 to 10, sophisticated processors or manufacturers. And so, with 700 licensed growers and, really maybe like 100 to 150, like I said, sophisticated growing operations. So, we have a pretty robust industry supplying New York City, which is probably one of the more robust marketplaces in the country too.
Hmm. Yeah, and I mean, it's so not talked about, like the East Coast, like use of cannabis
Mm,
and the adoption rate that's about to come with this domino effect after New Jersey went fully legal, right?
yep.
Um, it's just going to be, I would say, not just a rivalry, but I think it'll even take over the West Coast consumption rates. I mean, but who knows, right? And I say that because of course, the weather. It's colder, right? People are inside. We've seen during the pandemic, and you're inside, you're more likely to kind of be consuming cannabis over alcohol. Maybe you're doing both, but that rate is starting to rise with cannabis.
Well, and it's interesting you say that is because, the culture of cannabis in New York is so much different, but it's so robust, right? I mean, the reality is that, um, cannabis culture, in my opinion, was really, made cool, starting with some of the hip hop artists and the rappers in New York, right? And obviously
Right.
that, they picked up on that on the West Coast, but New York, we've got a long run history. I mean, we're also, unfortunately, maybe the catalyst for a lot of prohibition. You look at Harlem in the 40s and the 30s, and there was a lot of cannabis being smoked, and that was, a threat to some of these, politicians who wanted to get rid of it. So, we have a long run history, and it's social by nature too. Like cannabis consumption in New York is very social, which I found is different from what you've got, in Colorado and California, et cetera, where it's more so a more of a personal relationship with the plant.
I totally agree with you because again, when we before we recorded, I mentioned to you that I lived in the East Coast briefly for 4 years during college. Right, I was in Pennsylvania, and the school that I went to kind of brought people from all different East Coast states. Right, you had Connecticut, you had New York, Ohio, New Jersey, Pennsylvania. So and I noticed right away because I didn't have much experience with cannabis before, a little bit in high school, but it was a very social thing. It was like we're all coming together. I'm rolling this blunt,
Yep.
and it was a lot of blunt rolling,
Oh,
and it was a social activity.
everyone throws fives, everyone throws fives,
That's right.
and we call it sife, right? So you sife, and you get in a circle, and you pass the blunt, and that's kind of, and you smoke sour diesel, you smoke sour. If you're in New York, you smoke sour, right?
Right.
So yeah, there's a lot of culture already there, man, and it's gonna be fun, it's gonna be exciting, and it's gonna be innovative, right? It's gonna look totally different. I don't know if sales will surpass California necessarily. I mean, a lot more population too. But
Sure.
I mean, when in a normal year, I mean, we get tens of millions of visitors.
Exactly. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. I mean, the tourist attraction, no, not to discredit, LA and California and what they have out there, but it's going to be interesting, like you say. And so, like, where are they at right now? I mean, from what I've read, and it's just kind of been browsing headlines and kind of, skimming through the actual body text, but I've,
Mm.
Cuomo's proposed legislation, they push back on some of his provisions within it, right? I think he didn't want to do like personal grow plants, and there was other minor kind of details that they were trying to iron out. So where are they right now on that?
Well, yeah, I mean, so the governor proposed his plan, and the legislatures have a plan that they've been proposing for like 7 years now. Majority Leader Crystal Peoples Stokes has, and so the MRTA, which is a legislature's version, is very progressive, right? I mean, it looks at a marketplace that's equitable, that has a lot of opportunities throughout the supply chain. On-premise consumption is allowed, at-home delivery, home grow. I mean, these staples for reasonable legalization. The governor's proposal, not so much. I mean, it went backwards. There's this like very strange THC based tax. We actually just released a report on the effects of the industry today on that, and found that hundreds of millions of dollars worth of miscalculated tax could occur just based on standard measure of uncertainty from analytical testing labs. And so you wonder if that was really thought out before proposed. But there's also it doesn't really take equity. It doesn't go as far as the legislature's version on equity in the space. And also doesn't allow for on-premise consumption, which, listen, I mean, when we talk about on-premise alcohol consumption, there's probably no place that's more prolific than New York City, right? So it doesn't make any sense. So they're in negotiations. I think it gets done. It gets done I'll tell you, in the next 2 weeks. I think you see it gets done, right? And it's going to look like a version of the two. And then we'll see how quickly New York can actually stand up the program and get dispensaries licensed and growing operations licensed.
So you're confident that some of the things that are missing in Cuomo's proposed bill, you think that those will be addressed and included, or?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that the taxes are obviously an issue that's got to be worked out, but I think the legislature holds all the cards, right? At this point. I mean, there's an issue that they care about. The industry's on their side. I mean, there's no industry organization in New York that support the governor's plan. I
Right.
mean,
And
it's all,
plus all the bad news that's coming out too. It's kind of a bad time for him in terms of, having, um, level positioning, basically.
Well, when you have half the legislature calling, or half of New York State Democratic senators calling for you to resign, it's a tough
Right.
negotiating position to be in, for sure. So yeah, I think the leverage really is on the side of the legislature. And in this situation with cannabis, that's a great thing, because, like I said, the MRTA is very, very progressive. It really envisions an industry that looks like New York and looks like New Yorkers.
That's great. That's good to hear. So, well, let's talk about, like, the implications of, New York going adult use, right?
Mm,
I read an article recently. I forget the publication. I'm sorry about that, but that it was about Humboldt banning hemp cultivation,
mm,
right? And we've talked about on the podcast before about the cross-pollination issues that occur with outdoor cultivations and grows for hemp as opposed to THC, right? And this is a big problem that's obviously occurring. Humboldt's taken some action. I don't know if it was the right call to completely go ban, but you being so deep on the hemp side, like, how does that affect y'all, and what can be done to address it?
Well, for better or for worse, I think the New York hemp industry has really been built up around cannabinoids, and so that's a female only crop, right? I mean, should be a female only crop. So, I think that if we had an established fiber or grain growing, industry, I think that'd be a problem. I think you can look at zones too, and it really depends on where you are, right? I mean, if you're around where I am, in Binghamton, where it's almost like if you took if Binghamton was on like a bed sheet and you took it and you wrinkled it, or you pulled it up, right? I mean, that's how our hills are. I mean, we just have hills everywhere. So, and a lot of trees. So pollen doesn't really carry that far, right? When you get to the western part of the state, it is very flat, right? New York is massive, right? And the geological differences are huge too. So, in parts of the state, you can have 10-mile pollen drift, right? Around here in the Catskills and the Adirondacks, I mean, it might not go more than a quarter mile down the road. So I think it would be smart if counties and farm bureaus and growers kind of got together and said, well, I think we're going to have this area more for fiber and grain production, and this area more for female cannabis cultivation. I think you could really look at the east and the western part of the state as that. The western part of the state is much more conducive for fiber growing. New York is actually very conducive growing environment for fiber growing. If you're harvesting it in August, we have beautiful dry August, right, and a wet end of fall. September,
Mm-hmm.
October. So it's a problem that no one wants to talk about. That's for sure.
Right. It is. And I think that's a sensible approach. I mean, it takes both sides of the aisle coming together and trying to figure out, like you're talking about, the different variables that play into factor, right? the climate, the what's happening in the change of seasons on this part of the state versus the west or the east side, and what's more conducive to those types of grows. And it's going to take those conversations, because the last thing we want is for both sides to get in conflict with one another, ultimately do bans or whatever, where it hurts the industry overall, right? Because we're talking about the same plant ultimately. Obviously, hemp is hemp derived 0.3 or less THC, but still, it's still the cannabis plant.
Absolutely, it's still the cannabis plant, and there's enormous opportunity for New York farmers for growing fiber and grain crops. Right, I'm a little less convinced on the opportunity for the vast majority of our farmers for growing hemp for its cannabinoid content. To be honest, I don't. I think that ship is almost sailed a little bit, and I think that's oversupplied marketplace clearly. But when it comes to fiber and grain, it's really exciting. And so, how are you going to tell a farmer he can't go profit off his land because you've got a cannabis cultivation down the way? So it's going to be a tough thing. And fortunately, I think compromise can be met now because there isn't money being made by
Right.
growing fiber and grain, really, to a significant extent in New York. So before money, because money complicates everything, right? So before a lot of revenues being realized off growing pollinated crop, especially the farm bureaus, the county farm bureaus really need to start talking to their members about this, because or else you are going to have serious problems. You really cannot. I don't care if it's in a greenhouse or indoors. You cannot have an adult use cannabis, for its cannabinoid content, female only crop being grown right next to a pollinated field. It's just not going to work.
Right. And it's a great point you make about, like, now's the time. No money has not much capital in the space right now. Now's the time to figure these pain points out, so we don't have to address these headaches in the future.
Exactly.
Yeah. So, well, let's also talk about the challenges and opportunities that the New York hemp market presents, right? I know one obvious challenge is climate, right? I mean, I would imagine if you have an outdoor grow greenhouse, you're pretty limited on how many times you could harvest per year, right?
Yeah, I mean, I think most of the United States, anyways, you're only getting a single harvest, right? So I don't know if that necessarily puts New York at a disadvantage. What puts us at a disadvantage is short, the growing season is short, right? It's very difficult. I mean, it's past November 1st to have a high quality cannabinoid crop in the field gets tough. Past October 15th gets tough, right? So I mean, you're really looking at, 55-day flower, 60-day flower, crops, maybe a little bit longer. But some of these high cannabinoid hemp crops really aren't ready here in New York until the end of October. And harvesting, I mean, we've gone through two harvests ourselves in 2019, 2018. And, like I said, I mean, the Mother Nature calls it around November 1st. And, if whatever you have left in the field, it's kind of got to stay in the field, and so yeah, it's a tough climate. But when we have good growing seasons, and listen, climate change is making weather extreme in
Mhm.
everywhere, every part of the United
For
States.
sure.
But
Yeah, we just had that winter storm in Dallas recently,
yeah,
man. It's
no,
crazy.
and exactly, winter storm. And why would you think that would happen in Texas? You know what I mean? And then here, I mean, we can have a week of 105-degree weather during the summer, and that's going to create a lot of problems, right? A lot of problems in general. But we actually had a beautiful growing season last year. People have been growing high quality cannabis outdoors in New York, whether it's in the middle of a cornfield or along a ridge line or whatever, for decades, right? So it can be grown here. It's just different genetics. I mean, straight up. I mean, genetics have to be adapted here. So, when we talk about hemp now, on like I said, on the fiber side, I mean, some of our universities, Cornell and Morrisville, Cobblesco, are doing some really, really interesting work on the genetic side, especially with fiber. And they're saying, listen, the equipment is already there. Farmers already have the equipment to, cut the fiber in the field and let it ret. And if we can do this in August, well, August is the perfect month because farmers in New York, they're growing soy or they're growing corn most typically. And so when it gets to the end of September and October, they're out harvesting their corn and soy. And so if you give, they have time in August to go out there and harvest the fiber. So I'm very, very excited about the opportunities of fiber. With the problem with fiber is the infrastructure to process it, to get it to marketplace, needs to be developed. And we're talking about probably hundreds of millions of dollars worth of worth of investment. And I have some ideas on how New York could definitely spur that investment for sure, and the federal government.
Yeah, it's that decortication that you're talking about, right? The
Yeah.
separating the fiber from the herd. And I'm with you, man. Like we talk a lot on this podcast and most podcasts, right? And the discussion centers in cannabis around the medicinal and therapeutic benefits, which are vast because we're just scratching the surface. But we haven't even begun to scratch the surface on the fiber side of it, right? The fiber and grain. And that is so amazing and fascinating to me because of the endless applications that the hemp plant presents. It's the buffalo of plants. There's no waste.
Absolutely. Wow. If you do it right and you got the infrastructure, and so the separation of the fibers, and then there's a lot of steps too to get into a value add product, right? And so when we look at price parity with other products, so you think of like an MDF board, right? Material board. And I think that's a very exciting end use and product of hemp, right? You need to get that within a certain amount of, because there's elasticity, there's price elasticity with those kind of products. You go to Home Depot and you're working on your house, you're modeling house, you're building a new home, right? There's only a certain amount more you're going to spend for a green product, right? So that's where the federal government and New York State and the states and need to step in, and they need to add the externalized costs of these harmful products, right? These harmful type of material boards. They need to add that into the price, right? They need to add that in, whether that's a tax or some sort of fees, and so that we can see a parity with sustainable products. That's what hemp is, a sustainable product, right? I mean, the government needs to calculate the cost to society and the cost to taxpayers of cutting down a forest in order to make building materials. And what that is, you add that into the product, and all of a sudden a hemp fiber board is the same price.
Right. And I mean, what it comes down to, in my opinion, is a threat to industry, right? We've done something for so long. There's a lot of money in these industries. It's hard to broach that conversation because I think it's quite obvious once you kind of learn the basic understanding of what the hemp plant can do.
Yeah. Well, but the beautiful thing about developing a new industry, and we're seeing that here with adult use in New York, is you can make it equitable, right? You give new opportunities for entrepreneurs who maybe have been left behind, right? Communities that have not had these opportunities before. So yes, there is a threat, and going and saying, well, the timber industry is going to see a reduction in their economic output, et cetera, right? Especially here in New York. I mean, that's harvesting trees for timber and for wood products is huge, but it creates other opportunities too, and it creates other opportunities for other communities in places like New York, especially upstate New York. And we've seen a lot of population loss. Our infrastructure costs a lot of money, so the cost of living here is higher, the taxes are higher, and so we need to reimagine what upstate New York looks like. And I'm in a town that IBM started. Universal Instruments started here, and Endicott Johnson Shoe Company, which was the biggest shoe company before Nike came around, started here, right? And all that industry is gone. So now we need to rethink what's the next step. And I really think when we look at solving the greatest existential threat to our species is climate change, I think hemp is an integral part part of that solution.
And not only that, to add to that, I mean, all the different issues that we can address right now, like opioid addiction, all these different things, restorative justice, like undoing those wrongs with people who have been locked up and thrown in prison for the plant. But so my question is, like, I'm all about it, and people that are about, like, understand the plant, people of the plant, they get it also, right? How do we move this message forward, and how do we do it in a way that combats the rhetoric and the negative kind of comebacks that we've always heard for the past, I can't even tell you, over 70 years.
Well, so the interesting thing, I mean, the voters, I think, are telling that story. So in New Jersey, we looked at Bergen County. So, we've had an issue with getting adult use legalization across the table not on the Republican side, but on the Democrat side in suburban areas like Nassau County, which is on Long Island, and Suffolk County, Long Island, Westchester, right outside the city. But in New Jersey, they went to the ballot. We can't go to the ballot to vote on these kind of things in New York, but in New Jersey you can. And so in the fall, they went to the ballot, and almost every single county, no matter how red, no matter how much that county voted for Trump or not, uh, went almost or at least 62% in favor of legalization, all the way up to 66%. So that's 2/3 of the people. Now, when you look at a place like Bergen County, which is right across the GW Bridge, which is the main entryway in the New York City from New Jersey, it looks very similar to Nassau County, where those Democrats have been holdouts. So I think the people are sending a very clear message to politicians, whether it's in South Dakota or Bergen County, New Jersey, that they're ready for this. So I think it starts with that, and then also younger representation in the Assembly and Senate in New York. We've seen a paradigm shift in terms of how our lawmakers view issues like this. We have a new senator in the Hudson Valley who's chair of the Ag Committee in the state Senate, Senator Michelle Hinchy, and I mean she is very outspoken on this issue, and a lot of our younger representatives, combined with some of the more veteran lawmakers like Senator Lombardo right here in Binghamton, or Majority Leader Chris folks have been on this for 8 years now.
Mm-hmm. It's great to see that there are, policymakers that are stepping up, whether they are, of course, the blue side or the red side, because like we've talked about, there's enormous benefits to it, right? We do need to continue the education and not stop the messaging, and keep putting these, testimonials forward as well. The stories where people can actually tell how cannabis has impacted their lives and improved the quality of their life, because those are very important, because we've been stifled with no research due to the Schedule 1 listing. So that's important. I say that because I have a feeling that big pharma, as momentum starts to continue to grow, that they're going to be lobbying quite heavily with the same type of rhetoric that we've heard, in the past. So
Yeah.
I just think that, like, to your point, like, while we're doing this, we just need to continue to spread the message and educate others that aren't aware of these benefits, because we're up against a pretty big animal here pretty soon, I think.
Well, and I mean, they're already spending the money. GW Pharmaceuticals is spending, they're lobbying on almost every piece of hemp and cannabis legislation right here in New York, according to public filings. Now, Jazz Pharmaceuticals, right? GW Pharmaceuticals, they're lobbying in DC, they're lobbying in every single state. They're absolutely livid. I'll tell you what, they're absolutely livid over the hemp extract law that someone part of that we were able to get passed here in New York. And you know why? Is because it says, the FDA is dragging their feet on considering CBD and hemp derived cannabinoids as a dietary supplement. And we did it here in New York. And then we said, oh, by the way, it's also a food. And you can have 25 milligrams of CBD per unit in any food. And no one else has done that, right? And so
I had no idea. I had no idea New York did that. So New York said, "We're not waiting for you, FDA. We're gonna do our thing. We're gonna list it as a dietary supplement, also as a food." And they just kind of move forward within their own state.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And
Wow.
they said also, we recognize they're one of the largest markets in the world. And so we are going to do what the FDA can't do, and we're going to impose quality and labeling standards. So any products sold in the entire state need to be produced to good manufacturing practices, and they need to be labeled in a way that we think is clear and transparent to the consumer, including a QR code that links to COA test results. And those regulations go into effect here in April.
So my mind is kind of going all over the place with this, because I know the challenges and the consequences without having the FDA list CBD as a dietary supplement, right? And those are the following: it's difficulty in marketing and sales messaging, right?
Mm.
Like even the inability to run ads on social media. So that's one area. But then you've got this influx of just snake oil, low quality products, because there's no enforcement of the regulation, right? So in New York, is any of that different? Like, are y'all regulating as well? Are there higher standards in place when it comes to testing
Yep.
and all that? And yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. So, we do at Empire Standard, we do finished goods manufacturing, right? So we partner with brands and we help them get, cannabinoid products developed, whether they're cosmetics, ingestibles, et cetera. And we have to go through a process, with GMPs. And we get audited once a year. And the amount of paperwork and the amount of they're called HACCPs, right? So hazard analysis critical control points, right? So we look at through our process for every single product we run, where can that product get contaminated? And so what are the protocols that we can put in place to make sure that it's not contaminated? And then at the end, hold that batch. We call it a quarantine hold. We hold it in a separate area
Too
until
soon.
those test results get back. What? Yeah,
I said
too soon. No, exactly. Yeah, we're doing a lot of quarantines over here now. So we know every single product that comes off our line is quality, and New York manufacturers have to do that. But now, not only that, but if you're from out of state and you're going to sell your product in New York, you either have to go through a New York manufacturer, and now you already know there's a GMPs, or make sure that your manufacturer, wherever it is, whether it's yourself or whatever, have that certification. You have to prove that to the state, and the fines are like $1,000 starting off per product sold that's not in compliance. And retailers are licensed, and some of the regulations are certainly overzealous, right? And they definitely provide a large burden on smaller producers. But in absence of any federal leadership, a void of federal leadership on this issue, New York has to do it.
that's exactly what I was thinking. I was like, you're always gonna have those people that are like, now, I mean, New York's trying it, but they're missing the mark here, or and of course, like you can't please everybody, you can't get it perfect, right? With so many hands in the pot. But the fact that they're stepping up and just being like, we're not waiting for you, like FDA, we have to get moving, is commendable. I think that's awesome,
Yeah.
and I think more states, it would be great if more states stepped up. And because there's two benefits from that. One is you're setting your operators at a higher standard, right? And it kind of closes that gap of bad actors kind of entering
Mhm.
in. But then it also puts pressure on the FDA, just like we're doing at the adult use throughout the throughout the country, right? Eventually that federal scheduling is going to be overturned because the majority of the states that are within the federal government are adult use.
Yeah, exactly. And it takes leadership from states to get these things going. I mean, a good example is California took the leadership on emission standards for cars, and said, well, listen, if you want to sell your cars in California, you have to meet our emission standards. And so why would car companies create a separate California car and a car for the rest of the country, right? It doesn't make sense. So you just make all your cars according to those emission standards. It's the same kind of idea with CBD in New York. I mean, the reality is Vermont could not put these regulations into place because no one would sell their products into Vermont. You don't have much of a choice if you're a big brand in the CBD hemp cannabinoid space not to sell your products into New York.
Right. No, that's awesome, man. So let's talk about your company, Empire
Mm.
Standard. You mentioned a little about what you do in terms of your regulatory compliance and your high standards for
Yep.
manufacturing your products. But tell us more about what you do, and then I know that you're also the vice chair for the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association. So talk to us about that as well.
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Empire Standard, and so Empire Standard. So what we really are is we're a partner, we're a supply chain partner for cannabinoid brands, right? So all the way from low volume white label products to custom formulations and co-packing and helping companies scale. We also do pick, pack, and ship fulfillment. So we're really, if you're a brand, all you have to do is focus on your customer and sales, and we do the rest. So it's excellent. And within Empire Standard, we have the Castetter Cannabis Group. And it's a regulatory analysis and compliance firm. And so we help level the playing field. That's the way I call it. We help small, medium-sized businesses understand the regulation. We will be helping them get licenses in adult use cannabis and thrive. And because it's very complex. So whether that's figuring out how to, access new markets globally, or just understand and wade through the, extract regulations, within New York. That's what we do. And then that translates over to what I do, with the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association. We're probably the most influential cannabis organization in New York. We fight for the small farmer, we fight for the little guy, the manufacturer, and we're able to get things like the Hemp Extract Law passed. Right, we're able to work with Senator Schumer to extend the pilot program last fall a whole another year. We're able to work on adult use legalization and make sure that, large companies such as, Curaleaf for MedMen aren't the ones deciding, what the marketplace looks like. So it's really good work. We have over 50 members of the New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association, but we represent the entire industry. Like I said, we're really a champion for the small guy.
That sounds great. Well, I wanted to back up and what's the extract law that you said that y'all are trying to pass through?
Yeah, so we got that passed through in 2018. So the hemp extract law, so all those regulations that we were talking about before, the GMPs, the labeling requirements, everything like that, that all stems from the hemp extract law, right? And so that was something that Assemblywoman Lupardo, who's based out of Binghamton here, we introduced. We worked with the Farm Bureau to get support. We worked with farmers, and it sets a standardization. It levels the playing field for New York producers to say, listen, if you're going to have to produce to these standards, everyone will. That will have to sell in here. We're going to open it up for dietary supplements. We're going to open it up for food. We're going to, give you some clear and consistent guidelines there. And we're going to lead the world in terms of quality hemp cannabinoid products. And so, that was an amazing feat that we're able to get. It was the last bill to pass out of session. It passed near unanimously, but it literally passed at 6:30 in the morning before legislative session ended. So, that's all thanks to the tireless work that Senator Lombardo does. But, we were there making sure that, it got done, and that, not many, places do you really see that kind of representation of the small or mid-sized hemp operator.
Right, right. Well, that is amazing. So you guys were an integral part of that change and that kind of, innovative step that New York took.
Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we were right there in the middle of it, and then we were there to make sure that the regulations were done in spirit of the bill. And in one way, they really weren't. Well, one very significant way is that regulations, when they came out in November, they banned the sale of smokable hemp flower, which is like one of the leading product categories. It made no sense from a public health perspective. It makes no sense from a economic development perspective, and so we're pushing back on that. And so the same assembly member, Lupardo, who we passed the hemp extract law with, well, we have a bill right now who's introduced, picking up co-sponsors everywhere, just moved into a new committee that will prohibit the state from banning the sale of hemp flower. Those prospects look excellent, and so we're reversing that before those regulations can even come into effect.
That is such good news, because I know that is the similar kind of legal battle that's happening here in Texas. There's a Texas smokable hemp ban as well.
Yep.
In fact, I think this month was when they were gonna meet again to discuss it, because the trial had been put on hold, or it was set for a new date. So
we've been watching that closely in Texas.
Yeah, I mean they're so related, right? I mean, which is so ridiculous. Like you said, I mean, cannabis flower and consuming cannabis flower is one of the number one ways to consume, if not, and it's one of the best ways therapeutically, right? I mean, so it doesn't make any sense. But hey, that's the world we live in.
Exactly.
Right. So tell me, what is Empire Standard and New York Cannabis Growers and Processors Association looking forward to this year and beyond?
I'll tell you, legalization, right? We have a chance to, like I said, have a $3.7 billion marketplace. Our whole thing is we're going to create 1,000 millionaires as opposed to 1 billionaire in this marketplace. And I'm excited for it. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. New York, we're going to look at a economic recovery that's going to be robust. It's going to be a great time. And, this summer I invite you up to New York. I think we're going to be, like I said, having a great time, because legalization, in my opinion, is inevitable in the next few weeks here in the budget. And then I think we're also looking forward to getting back to normal like everyone else in the world, right? and seeing a little more robust demand on the consumer side for sure. Maybe some relaxation on the federal side in terms of access to banking. That would be really nice.
That would be nice. Yes. And I've told my wife we need to get back to my alma mater in Pennsylvania. So if we do that, we'll definitely head up to upstate New York. And I got 5 on it, man.
Yeah, right.
If there's if adult use is passed by then, I got 5 on it. We'll roll up a blunt and we'll you could show me around the different grow ops.
Absolutely, man. I think you'll come and find that we have some of the finest cannabis in the world. I mean, just amazing stuff, and just the culture and the people that we have here are amazing. And when we have an adult use cannabis industry, like I said, I hope to see all these on-premise consumption lounges, in back of me. I don't know if you can see the video, but the wineries and the breweries in New York State are amazing destinations to come and enjoy New York and the natural landscape. And I think cannabis is going to be right there too. And so I'm looking forward to it over the next, this year and the next year, and just, really being one of the hubs for, cannabis in the world.
It's exciting time, Kaelan. No doubt about it, man.
Absolutely.
Where can people find y'all's website and social media if they want to learn more?
Absolutely. Yeah. So empirestandard.com. And, you can reach out to me on LinkedIn, Kaelan Castetter on LinkedIn, on Twitter at Kaelan Castetter. You can find our regulatory insights at castettercannabis.com. And yeah, I look forward to connecting with everyone. Shoot me an email, shoot me a message on LinkedIn.
Kaelan, you're a very informed guy. I really appreciate the insights. I know my audience did as well. And,
Absolutely.
as the New York cannabis market starts to grow and evolve after, this adult use bill passes, let's have you back on, man, and talk about, how the market in New York is progressing.
I would love to, and, continue to, provide information and keep breaking down the stigma by getting voices out there. It's great work that you're doing.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
And thank you all for listening. Bye.